Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third in our Broward County Bar Association Enlightenment through Engagement series. Once again, this afternoon promises to be a fantastic discussion with some absolutely tremendous moderators and panelists. But before we do anything, it is incumbent upon us to thank those who make what we do at the bar possible. So without further ado, Mr. Executive Director Braulio Rosa.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. And so true, we need to thank our wonderful sponsors who make this possible. And so here we go. We have Halitzer Pettis Schwam and Kelly Eustall. We have Kim Von Lerner and the Foreman Family Group. Thank you all for being supporters of this much needed program.
Thank you, Braulio, and thank you to all our sponsors. So in this, the third in our series, Criminal Justice Reform, we have today a group of moderators and a very special group of panelists who I like to call our frontline workers in our justice system, our very own 17th Circuit judges. It would be wonderful if we had all of them, but it's just not possible to have all of them gathered at the same time for a discussion of this type and of this magnitude. So we have representatives from a wide spectrum of our various courts here in the 17th participating in today's conversation. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's take an opportunity to contextualize today's conversation about criminal justice reform with a very short video, just putting forward some facts, some statistics that give body and context to today's conversation. Lauren, please. So without further ado, allow me to introduce one of our co-moderators for today's conversation, Judge Tarlika Navarro. Judge.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is an honor and privilege to be here with all of you to discuss such an important topic and something I am very proud to be a part of, which is our specialized and therapeutic courts. Today, I have the privilege of introducing my distinguished colleagues sitting on our panel. Please play the video. We have Chief Judge Jack TUTER, Judge John Fry in Veterans Court, Judge Florence Barner in the Community Court, Judge Ari Porth in Mental Health and Drug Court, and Judge STACY Ross in Juvenile Delinquency Court. Thank you all for being here with us today, and welcome to everyone in attendance. We thank you for being here. I want to make a brief statement on behalf of the judiciary and my fellow panelists today. Although we are here to discuss a very important topic, criminal justice reform, as sitting judges, our personal opinions or points of view regarding criminal justice reform are not factors in our judicial decision-making. We are charged to interpret the laws and to protect the constitutional rights of all citizens, regardless of race, gender, nationality, or any other form or label. We cannot opine on specific issues, cases, or controversies because they may come in front of us in our future. Although this is meant to be a thoughtful and meaningful dialogue among the judiciary and the bar, your respect for the limitations of our judiciary will be very much appreciated and will allow us to continue this conversation in the future. With that said, I would like to introduce our moderators. Please play the video. We have Sue Ann Robinson, former Assistant State Attorney and TV legal analyst. Robinson has received congressional recognition for her service to the state of Florida, and she practices criminal defense and civil rights litigation in state and federal courts. Next, we have Chris Saunders, is the Assistant General Counsel of Miami-Dade College. He is a past president and current board member of the T.J. Reddick Bar Association and the chair of the Broward County Bar Association's Volunteer Bar Liaison Committee. And then, of course, you have me. I sit in the Drug Court Division at this time. And at this time, I'm going to send it over to our co-moderators, Sue Ann and Chris.
All right, I appreciate it so much. Again, an honor to be asked to participate in this very important conversation. Thank you, President Vaughn, and all of our panelists from the judiciary. I'll just say first, as an introduction, the judges are in many ways a part of our legal system's frontline workers, as President Vaughn mentioned. They are the recipients of the policies and the laws that our partisan elected officials put in place. They obviously have immensely powerful tools at their disposal, but they only have the tools that the law provides them. So while they can provide, of course, insight into how those tools get used in our criminal justice system, they cannot and should not be held accountable for the limitations of the tools that are at their disposal. And of course, we're having this conversation because there's a belief that to change the system, it must be fixed from the inside. So that's why we're starting this conversation.
That's right, Sue Ann. Our judiciary, especially these panelists, they've committed themselves to not to changing laws, but to improving how justice is administered in this county. So we can talk about the failures of the system, but you have to understand that that it is the system that is accountable. Our judges do their best to improve that system. And that is what we plan to talk about with them today, how it intersects with several long-standing and growing areas of deep societal concern, and to discuss its limitations and impact on the most vulnerable populations, from minorities to the mentally ill, to our veterans, to the homeless. Our goal is to hear from our own frontline workers, our judges, about their observations from their perspective on what can be done to help improve the administration of justice and to understand what it looks like from their eyes. Our goal remains to start this meaningful dialogue. Back to you, Sue-Ann.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to start with a question for Judge Fry in county court, because we have so many of the specialty court judges here. It would be kind of in county court where defendants are funneled essentially to specialty courts. So I wanted to ask you, what are the assessment tools, or what do you have in place? What are you using to transfer cases to the drug court, mental health court, community court? What are you using currently?
I think each one of us in county court, and hello, Sue-Ann, thank you everybody for participating and being present. Each one of us in county court, as well as division courts in circuit, are aware of all the various options. We begin to start to see indicators initially, even as early as magistrate court. For example, in the probable cause affidavit, there's a box to check if you're a veteran. In the body of the narrative of the probable cause that our judges, both county and circuit, do on a daily basis, we can glean information from the probable cause affidavit as to what has occurred. In addition to that, in Broward County, we have tremendous collegiality. Every person in this group, I know personally, I know well, we call each other at all hours, seeking input and advice. But our goal collectively under Judge TUTER is to address people and eventually getting them out of the system. Judge TUTER, since taking over, he's created a second look court. In county court, we now have a second look court where we look at people who are held for de minimis bonds to come up with alternative ways to get them out of county jail. I believe our jail population, at least as a month ago, was the lowest it's been as long as I've been in the judiciary. And I think that collectively, we all have come to the realization, if you look at it, Sue-Ann, going back in time, incarceration was a solution. The legislature at one point said that incarceration was punishment instead of an effort to reform people. And each and every one of us has come to realize that the best effect to the system is to get people out of the system. So we all very diligently attempt to get people into specialized courts. And each and every one of these individuals, you know, Eric, God bless him, he's incredible at what he's done, and he's done it since the day he took the bench. Stacy, she in her area in juvenile court, I would not do well in juvenile court, but Stacy and all the judges there do an incredible job. Tarlika, Florence with our new community court is incredible. And I'm blessed with Ed Merrigan, who says hi to everybody and is currently in Fort Knox at a confidential meeting in a skiff, who, by the way, is also a general in the United States Army Reserve, are humbled to have been allowed to serve in these positions. And I know on behalf of all of us, Jack, we thank you.
Well, I appreciate your answer. And the next question I have, you feel free to lead off because you're in county court, obviously, but you did mention magistrate court, which is where bonds are set. And there's a lot of discussion surrounding bail reform and monetary bail, and possibly doing away with monetary bail as a way to assist with vulnerable communities not remaining in custody. So, and again, any of the judges can respond, but what does bail reform look like in the 17th Judicial Circuit, or in your individual opinion, you know, on the bench? What is good, solid bail reform? What does that look like?
I think that the answer is we are already very aggressively releasing people with the minimum requirements to ensure the safety of the public. Our magistrate judges are resolving trespasses and other misdemeanors basically at the first appearance. I think that we are attempting, and we've had a little bump with the sheriff's office, quite frankly, because in light of COVID and in light of direction from Judge TUTER, we basically ran out of ankle monitors. And so I think that we've been able to address those issues as we've started to come up to speed in this pandemic. And again, every judge has in custody. Daily, we get a list from the sheriff's office of every single in custody defendant in the circuit. We're aggressively looking at them, well, bearing in mind, Sue Ann, that our other primary responsibility is to protect society as well. So it's a balancing act for us. But I think we're doing a pretty good job because our count is down tremendously on in custodies, and our crime rate is not going up much either. And I think that's one of the takeaways from this. If you look back through history, every calamity has resulted us in changing the way we do some things. Zoom, who wants to go to the courthouse anymore and pay the parking in the hour drive if you have a 5-minute hearing? Inversely, we are doing everything we can to reduce the population without increasing the risk to society. And I think we're succeeding at it, quite frankly.
Okay. Do any of the other judges have an opinion with respect to additional or things that they see are working in terms of the bail issue? Because again, the reason why we're talking about it is because the perception is that this is one of the major issues. And I think, to Judge Fry's point, that the 17th Judicial Circuit does have things in place to assist. So are there any things specifically? I know you mentioned, Judge Fry mentioned the ankle monitors, and are there any additional things that we're doing right now in the 17th Judicial Circuit to assist people that are homeless or obviously low income that cannot get on a monitor? Because my understanding is you have to pay to be monitored as well.
That can be waived, just so you're aware, Sue Ann.
I was just going to say that can be waived, but if I can jump in, good evening or good afternoon to everyone, and thank you again for putting this on. One of the things that we do with respect to our homeless population in particular, we work closely with our officers in the various localities, and in the city of Fort Lauderdale, particularly when it comes to the community court, we issue NTAs. That keeps people out of jail, period. A notice to appear. It's an out of custody arrest. It's keeping you out of the jail system, period. So there is no issue with bond because you're not in jail. You're issued a notice to appear with a promise to return to court. So that is one mechanism that the court uses in addition to what Judge Fry had previously discussed.
Joanna, I just wanted to compliment the folks at Broward Sheriff's Office pretrial division. I work with them regularly. They have specially assigned mental health pretrial specialists that help folks in the community. Even if they're not on an ankle monitor, they may have special conditions to keep a curfew, and other conditions can be set by the court, but they work really well with folks, and I just wanted to give them praise.
So I'm going to jump in here and just kind of take like a little bit of a step back, because this has been a really good insight right from the beginning. But just to kind of contextualize what it is that each one of you represent, Judge Varner, I'll go to you first, and then anybody else can jump in. Could you just describe a little bit about what issues your specific division is designed to address? And so, Judge Varner, we know that you are in the community court. So let's talk about the type of problems that these specific divisions are trying to solve.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that. With respect to the community court, what we do is we're really aimed at taking a holistic approach to our clients who come in before us. What we do there is if an individual is facing some level of homelessness and they're arrested for a low-level crime, meaning a quality of life crime, drinking in public, sleeping in public, urination in public, because homelessness itself is not a crime, but unfortunately all these other things are. And what happens with that is these people end up going through the system and they get cycled through. So they're getting arrested for the same thing over and over and over again, but there's no real, why are they doing this? No one's getting down to the roots of the cause of these issues. So that's what we aim to do in community court. We take a holistic approach to the individual who's in front of us. So that's really our focus is, those homeless individuals who do commit low-level misdemeanor crimes, which result in municipal ordinance violations or just regular misdemeanors.
Would anybody else like to take that question? If not, I'd love to hear from Judge Ross.
All right. Obviously, I don't speak on the issue of bail because juveniles don't have to post bail. But, you know, the sentiment that Judge Fry expressed about juvenile court, I've heard that repeated to me many times, that people, it's an undesirable division to be in. But I have to say, when we're speaking about criminal justice reform, I honestly believe that juvenile court is the most viable opportunity that we have to affect change. Getting these children at the age of 14, sometimes younger, 12, 13, and actually putting program systems in place that can help these children and steer them away from ending up in the prison system is why I love my job and why I'm very passionate about being in juvenile court.
Just to kind of dovetail off of that, Judge Tutor, I do have a question for you. What process goes into, I guess, determining that there's a need for these types of courts? In other words, how is it that, you know, administratively, you assess, you know, what's going on and make the determination, okay, we should have a community court?
Yeah, so these specialty courts really evolved way back when Judge Ross's father was chief judge, starting with drug court. Maybe Judge Tobin started Veterans Court, maybe. But these courts have had a long evolution. I can't remember, Ari, when we created Mental Health Court, but they have a long duration. And I think, I hate to say it, but I think they come about as a necessity that presents itself at the time. You know, for instance, when we created community court 4 years ago, you know, the mayor and others had been on us about, is there anything the courts can do with the homeless population downtown particularly? And their goal is different than ours. Their goal is, you know, they want the community and the streets and everybody to look beautiful for the tourists to come and create revenue for the city. But when I looked at community court and I saw so many people on really low-level bonds in the jail, I was kind of aghast. I mean, if someone's in jail on a $500 bond, that person's not in jail because of their crime. They're in jail because of their poor. I mean, most anybody can get someone in their family to post either the $500 or with a bondsman, the 10% that requires. And so I think it came out of necessity of looking at people who were being arrested for low-level crimes and either being forced to plea because they were in jail on a bond and just wanted to get out of jail, which I thought the whole kind of system there was upside down. So these specialty courts, and if you look at other jurisdictions, especially the smaller ones, they don't have the opportunity to do what we do with these specialty courts, but they really only have one goal, and that is to bypass people from the criminal justice system or offer them some alternative to incarceration. And Judge Ross could not be more accurate. If we don't catch some of these kids by 13 or 14, when you go looking at some of their records and some of their inability of their parents to control them at home, they are headed one direction, and that's to adult felony court somewhere down the road. So anything we can do in the criminal justice system along the line, whether it's mental health or veterans or homeless people, we've really made a concerted effort to do that. And I think a lot of that also is driven by the legislature. I think the legislature made some really bad decisions years ago when they thought incarceration was the key to keeping the streets safe. And then they get 100,000 people in the state prisons and they realize, wait a minute, we can't incarcerate everybody. First, the cost of that is enormous. And second, not a lot of these people, not a lot. I mean, there are a lot, don't get me wrong, just go over there and watch. There are a lot of people who don't need to be incarcerated, that don't pose the public safety risk that can be on some other type program. So I think the legislature, Senator Brandis has really been out in front of this in the sessions. He's been the president there. I think you're going to see more of a development on a focus on specialty courts, less incarceration, and more problem-solving courts.
Chris, can I just piggyback on something that Chief Tutor said? He mentioned the cost and how it seems to have bipartisan support. I've heard a number, $120 a day to incarcerate somebody in the jail, and very frequently The court that I sit on, the felony mental health court, has to send somebody to a forensic hospital when they are of such danger to themselves or others. That figure is astoundingly high. It could be from $120,000 a year to $150,000 a year. What we are doing in Broward more recently through the efforts of Broward Regional Health Planning Council is trying to divert people when appropriate and when safe to community-based support, where they're in residential treatment programs that can be so much more effective and safe to the public and help people with stable housing and making sure that they're taking their medication. But it has the idea of getting people out of the forensic hospitals and out of the jails it proves to be a significant cost savings, which finds you have support on both sides of the aisle. Senator Brandis in particular, he's been a huge support for that.
I can jump in on that too, Judge Porth. Also, I mean, I'm going to actually increase your figure a little bit. It's $140 a day. Think about that, $140 a day times one person that you leave in the jail for, let's say, a week. How much is that? Times 10, times 50, times 100. I mean, the reality is that we're making efforts across the board to try to cut back on the number of individuals that are being housed in the jail, because that's the cost just to have you in the jail. That's not the cost to treat any medical illnesses that you may have, to feed you, to clothe you, to anything. So these are real cost saving measures that we're taking on behalf, that our chief judge has really pushed, and I can't thank him enough for putting us in the respective courts that we sit.
And Chris, I'm going to jump in with that on drug court. What our drug court participants are facing, and they're going to need detox. They're going to need housing help. Like Judge Barner, our drug courts are very therapeutic and that approach as well, and holistic. The jails can't offer that type of detox and that type of medication for the well-being and safety of our community who has drug and substance abuse problems. So it is in the benefit of our circuit and our community and our struggling drug court participants to get them in a facility that is safe for them to detox and where they can have a safe place to stay the night and have a place over their head. So to take that money and put it towards their treatment is much more beneficial for everyone.
Great.
I agree. And we know that people coming before each of you can often have an array of issues. For example, if there's a veteran that might have a mental health issue and be experiencing homelessness, what do you think has community court aided in kind of putting that all together? To how do you all deal with if there's one person that has multiple needs?
That's actually all I do in community court. I want to kind of give people a little bit of an overview of what community court actually is. Community court, we launched the first one ever in the history of Florida, thanks to the chief judge with his initiative and pushing us to get a grant from the Centers for Court Innovation from the Bureau of Justice Administration. That is the federal government. They gave us $100,000 to push this court off. And what we've used that money for is we've been able to build bridges and partnerships. So we have the city of Fort Lauderdale who's partnered with us. We have the Fort Lauderdale Police Department who's partnered with us, Broward Health, Memorial Health Systems. We have to have, again, a holistic approach to this. So we have to have those partnerships in place to have this program be successful. We have Henderson Behavioral, who is the largest behavioral mental health provider for all of Broward County. They sit in the room with me. And I should tell you, community court is actually very different from all the other courts. We don't sit in the courthouse. Like I said, we are all a different breed of judge. Every single judge you see here, we're all a different breed. We actually get off the bench. We don't just sit on the bench. Our courts are not always in the courtroom. So my court is actually held at Fort Lauderdale City Hall. That actually right now, we are temporarily housed over at Holiday Park, where we have a little tent, and that's where our court is actually held. It's state of the art because we have all kinds of really cool equipment and everything to bring it live. But that's what we do. We have the mental health providers there in the room with us who are performing those evaluations right then and there when the person is in the courtroom. And then they get a chance and opportunity to go to each individual service provider. So I have SunServe, who provides counseling and case management services. We've got career services. We've got Broward Sheriff's Office for the individuals who have to do community service, because that's actually part of community court. Remember the village model? that we're all part of the village. So the courthouse is part of that same village. And it's incumbent upon each one of us as judges to remind folks that, hey, we're still here, we're part of your village, and we're trying to help in every capacity that we can. If that means us, getting off our benches and going out into the community, that's what we're here for, and that's what we're doing. And it's that important that you understand that's what community court is. You do not even have to have a criminal charge to bring you to community court, because I want to give you some stats. And my figures, again, are not exactly updated. I apologize, I didn't have a chance to do that. But as of the end of 2019, we had 122 community court cases that came from different judges directed to community court. That consisted of 624 hearings. Fast forward to February of 2020, we had over 1,100 walk-ins. You heard that number, 1,100 walk-ins. Now, those are families. Those are not just individuals. They can be individuals, they can be families, they can be veterans, but we see every single walk of life that comes into this court. And so when you say, well, what happens when someone comes in with a multitude of issues? Well, that's what we do. We have the staff here to literally address every single issue, including housing. I can't thank United Way enough for them and Memorial Hospital for helping us to provide housing. And I'm proud to announce that we've joined a partnership with Memorial again to provide housing for our veterans. It's a big deal. Housing first. That's the motto, is housing first, because how can you deal with any of the issues if you don't have a roof over your head? And that's an amazing thing that we're able to do with this court. And again, thank you to the Chief Judge for putting us into these positions to be able to help.
Well, I appreciate that information, because I think a lot of times the people who are being serviced obviously are aware of what's happening, but sometimes, people in the community may not. So that's an awesome opportunity and doing great work. I wanted to follow up with Judge Ross just briefly, because you and Chief Judge TUTER did mention that juvenile court can be a pipeline to adult court. And that's why it's probably one of the most critical specialty courts in terms of, slowing down that pipeline from people who are starting on a bad track. So what are some of the tools that you have at your disposal and are using in juvenile courts to kind of slow that pipeline down?
So in the juvenile division in general, we have a plethora actually of programs that we implement to address those issues. Number one, we have Promise program. We have civil citation. We have diversion programs for first offenders. We have juvenile drug court, which I understand Judge Navarro is going to be presiding over. We have, I'm a proponent of these specialty courts. So juvenile is a general division, but I also think it's important to really address the unique needs of our populations. And, and I believe that's just how Broward is. And that's evidenced by, I think Judge Lerner Wren, I see, is in the chat. Her drug court, her mental health court was the first mental health court in the country, established in 1997. I think actually established in the world, the first one. And so I remember starting out as a young lawyer, and I was actually assigned to her division, and seeing the effective work that she did has really led me to be a fan of specialty courts. So one of the specialty courts that I started when I began in the juvenile division was my girls' court. And girls' court, when you talk about that pipeline to prison, there was an excellent study that came out of Georgetown University, and it's actually called The Sexual Abuse Pipeline to Prison, A Girl's Story. And it is, in the study, they found that sexual abuse is considered a primary predictor of girls in the juvenile justice system, which leads to trauma, which leads to adult court. So what I found when I started in juvenile court, I found these girls appearing before me, and many times it seemed to me that there was an underlying issue. So why are these girls appearing in court? And if you look at the studies, it indicates that 1 in 4 girls will experience some form of sexual abuse by the age of 18. 15% of sexual assault and rape victims are under the age of 12. And at this point, they estimate about 30% of the population in juvenile court are girls, and that number is rising. So the purpose of girls' court is really to try to find out that underlying reason, what the underlying trauma is, if there is, and then give them the gender responsive wraparound services that they deserve in order to address why they're entering the court system, get them that help that they need, and then hopefully end that pipeline to prison format that we have. Judge TUTER, I have to say, is so incredibly supportive of these specialty courts. Another court that we offer in juvenile, and it's a crossover court with dependency, is RISE Court. RISE Court stands for Restoring Independence Through Strength and Empowerment. And this court is specifically designed for the victims of human trafficking. So we have children entering our court system in so many different formats, in family court, in crossover court, dependency court, delinquency court, and they can be victims of human trafficking. When we identify those children and they are verified, they have the opportunity to come to my RISE court, where they can get specialized, unique therapies and services to address the trauma that they've experienced. I'm just going to kind of say everything at once since I got the floor here. I want to say that I have the numbers for this year of children that were processed through the Juvenile Assessment Center, which is basically meaning children that were arrested. And the numbers this year so far, we've had 959, which our numbers are actually down. And a lot of that is attributed to participating in promise, to participating in diversion courts and civil citation. The alarming number is 80% of those are male. 20% seem to be female, but the alarming number is 74% of them are Black and 25% white or Hispanic. And, that's one of the things that we have, these diversion programs, we have these civil citation programs, but I feel as far as reform goes, we need to be more effective or more intentional in our diversion programs that we're offering. And I believe that's why I'm a strong proponent of specialty courts, because I think in the specialty courts, you can be intentional. You can look at the individual's needs, assess those needs, and then provide their unique services that are going to benefit them best. And I believe that the same thing really needs to be happening in diversion courts to our first offenders, the programs that we're using, the mentors that we're providing. We need effective, passionate people working with these children.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate your comment about intentionality, because I think it's so important. And I'm sure we'll have opportunity to follow up. But just to put a pin in, what from you all's view from the bench, we would like to find out, what can, because I know we do have some elected officials and obviously you have community members, what we can do, if anything, to assist. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, thanks, Sue-Ann. So I think that's a good question. And so first, I'd like to shout out Judge Lerner-Wren. Yes, you've done an excellent job. I've appeared before you, and I think you're a great, addition and advocate to specialty courts. But with regards to, that question that Sue-Ann kind of brings up about what can we do? And Judge Porth, I'll start with you, and Judge TUTER, if you want to jump in, if you have anything to add. What can the external community, not necessarily the organizations that you're partnering with to kind of provide wraparound services to the people that come before you, but the citizens, the lawyers that are involved with the bar. What is it that we can do to kind of support your court, for your example, for what you preside over, or any of these?
Chris, I would just encourage the folks on this. Let me first welcome Representative Dodie Joseph. I'm so delighted that she's here. And the folks on this panel, not the judges, but the folks on this panel, get a seat at the table, join important committees in your cities and on the county. The judges here, we don't make policy. That's not what we're here to do, but you guys can. You guys can run for state representative and run for state senate and make those policy changes that will effectuate real change. So I would encourage you to do that, or have meaningful conversations with the people that represent you, like Representative Joseph, who's listening in. So find out who your representative or who your state senator is. You can look up those folks at myfloridahouse.gov and find out who your representative is, or flsenate.gov. I did want to make one suggestion. It was something that Judge Fry had said earlier when we were talking about magistrate court. Before we even get to the court system, why don't we avoid coming here in the first place and have the type of training a lot of the law enforcement officers in Broward County have gone through, and it's all over the country. Many officers have gone through something called Crisis Intervention Team Training, CIT training. It is a fantastic program. It's a 40-hour course. Many of the BSO deputies have already taken it. CIT training, I would highly encourage, if you live in a city where you don't have CIT trained officers, talk to your chief and your city commissioners about bringing CIT training in. It's where officers learn more about mental illness and intellectual disabilities and how to be more appropriate. It's for their own safety too. If they come upon a scene where somebody is in a mental crisis, they will learn how to de-escalate the situation. So perhaps that person isn't arrested and they're instead brought to a receiving facility where they can be appropriately treated.
Right. Judge TUTER, before you jump in, if you have anything that you would like to add, I just want to encourage, those that are watching, if you want to, send in a question, we will do our best to take a look at them, and if we can get to it, we will do our best. But Judge TUTER, to you, if from your perspective, is there anything that the community can do outside of what Judge Porth was saying? Is there an opportunity for lawyers who just want to help to be able to support the specialty courts in some way?
Well, of course. I mean, Judge Porth said it best, but there are tons of things outsiders can do that we can't do. I think many people listening, I know the representative would know, we're very lucky to have a very wealthy county. They fund and support many of these programs that the state will not. And so I have to give kudos to our county commission when we ask for things, or case managers, or things to supplement what the state gives us. And this challenge, Chris, is going to be really big the next 2 years. They're looking at cutting the courts potentially 8.5% in this current fiscal year, and potentially 10% the year after. So they're going to try to find ways to avoid that. But the people that go when they start cutting the courts are these support staff for these specialty courts, people that they think aren't just the most critical component. They can't cut judges, they can't cut their JAs. So that's when you all need to be involved and write letters and speak to these local folks. They don't get a lot of input, my perception, on some of this stuff. And I think just a phone call by you all to your local representative when something comes up on defunding or cutting funding for support for these specialty courts, it's critical that they hear from the outsiders. They know the judges are invested in it, and I don't know that our phone call means too much these days, Judge Porth, but they'll certainly listen to us. But I think outsiders certainly make a big contribution. And before I get off here, I just want to express to everybody who's listening here, Chris and Sue Ann and everybody, I think it comes across the passion of the judges who were involved in these specialty courts that are speaking on this, and Judge Lerner Wren, who's listening in. You have a bunch of circuits where they may have a few specialty courts, and the judges reluctantly rotate in because the chief judge puts them in, and they stay for a year, go through the motion, don't make much change in that division. But if you see our judges who have been in these divisions for many years, who refuse to rotate out, I'm going to have to dynamite some of these judges out. It just shows you the passion they have for the things they do every day. And they are so skilled, and we're just very lucky in the 17th here, not just with a bench, but with a bar who participates in these programs, who helps us refine and make them better year after year. We're certainly not perfect. And if we had all the money in the world, we could do a lot more. But I think we're making substantial strides here in the 17th. And I hope it comes across from my colleagues how passionate each of them are in the roles they play each day in people's lives. It is, you know, when you're dealing with life and liberty and whether someone gets out or doesn't get out or pleads to a crime they may not have done just to get out of jail or didn't. These are big issues for people that we serve.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate that. And I obviously we all appreciate the good work that the specialty court judges are doing. I guess a good follow-up question is, you know, how does a judge get appointed in our circuit to be part of a specialty court? Are they choosing? Is it like drawing straws? What's happening?
Well, Sue Ann, it always depends on the dynamics. Right now, I've got about 5 judges who want to go to criminal and there's no spots for them. So right now, we're not in a system where we rotate as other circuits are mandatorily. In other words, Palm Beach and Dade both, you rotate every year, and a lot of it's by seniority. And I think a lot of it is what we're talking about right now. If I rotate a brand new judge into Judge Port's mental health division, and I put Judge Port in a dependency division, what have I done to further the needs of the circuit by making him move against his will with all of the institutional knowledge he or Judge Ross or Judge Fry or Judge Lerner Wren have? You know, it is certainly a balancing act, and there are judges who want to rotate in. Judge Navarro and Judge Singer just rotated, just switched, and Judge Navarro volunteered for it, was passionate about wanting to come in. So all of that plays into it. Why is the judge wanting to move into that division? What are their goals? Is there a vacancy? Who do I kick out unnecessarily, maybe in some instances? So that's not what they pay me for here as the chief judge. I try to do the old, you know, Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, Menachem Begin deal, trying to find peace and say, you know, you'll get there, just wait a couple years. Because so many of our judges now are young. I mean, my goodness, we have judges in their 30s.
Yes.
I mean, they're going to outlive everybody on this panel. I mean, right, Erie? They'll have plenty of time to get your division, Judge Port.
And you know, on that, I'd just like to add to what Judge TUTER just said. You know, with the specialty courts, especially, you know, all these other jurisdictions say mandatory rotation is good. You got to rotate them in and out. But in these specialty courts, sometimes the judge is the only consistency that many of these individuals have in their lives. In juvenile court, their case managers change, the public defenders change, everyone changes. People, you know, move jobs, and the judge remains constant. I have kids that have been appearing before me for years. I know their parents from coming in. I know what's going on in their lives. And I think to be effective in a specialty court, consistency is important.
I was just going to jump on that as well, because that's, you said it, consistency, because that is really what these folks need, is some sort of consistency. And if the court can be that consistent thing in their lives, why not? Why shouldn't we? I mean, again, we are part of this community. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we raise our families here. So it is important to us individually as judges that every single member of our community gets the help that they need, and with compassion and with dignity, and also with consistency. Because again, I can't do what Judge Forth does. I can't do what Judge Fry does. I cannot do what Judge Ross does. But neither one of them can do what I do either. You know, and that's what's important, is that we're consistent, and that, you know, we're also training the next generation of judges behind us. And that's actually what's kind of cool about this, is that Judge Lerner Wren, who's in the ether out there, but she's pretty much trained almost all of us, I would say, in some capacity. So this is part of her legacy of continuing the training of judges. But you also asked, what can the community do? Come to court. Come to court. It's on Zoom now. Come to court. Come and check us out. Come see what we're doing.
On a key point, and that is, I mean, Judge Ross, God bless her, is probably the best person I know personally for the job that she does. Florence, same thing. You know, Ari, I've known Ari for a long time, and I can't think of anybody that's more patient and kind in working through these cases. I have the advantage of being in Veterans Court, where we work under a little bit of a different structure. And that's why I can't really do what some of these other judges do. And each one of us has found our niche. as far as what we do. And I think every one of us at some point has driven home literally crying because we know we sent somebody to prison, or that some human being, regardless of what they did, their children are going to have these issues as a result of that missing parent, which is going to perpetuate the problems. And that's why we're so passionate about this. I don't know a judge that enjoys sending people to prison, no matter how heinous the act is, because you're not just sentencing that individual to prison, you're sentencing their family and their loved ones and their community to the loss as a result of it. And that's not even going into the victims. And I think that's part of the passion that every one of us brings to what we do, is that we get to go home every day with a smile, knowing that potentially we've done some good, which is why we became lawyers and why we became judges. And, you know, let's face it, you don't leave work at the end of your day in the foreclosure division with a smile on your face. And I commend each one of these people. I've worked with them, and they're incredible at what they do. And Jack has put the right people in the right spots. So,
Judge Fry, you actually kind of hit the nail on where I was going to go, and wanted to ask this question to you. And it's fitting that you actually brought it up. What personality traits do you think it takes to sit in your particular court? And, you know, anybody else feel free to jump in, you know, with regards to their perspective, but I'd love to hear from you about what you think it takes to be in yours.
In Veterans Court, Ed and I are both blessed because, with rare exception, the vast majority of the people at some point have had years of structure in their life. And they've had people in that management position, whether it be your platoon sergeant, your captain, your brigade commander, whatever it may be, who they look up to and predominantly assume is right in their decision making. And so all of our defendants, with very rare exception, have honorably served, been honorably discharged, and they understand that life can be good. They've just lost their way. Whereas I guess Stacy and Flo and Ari have to make people realize to some extent that life is good. We're blessed that the majority of the defendants in Veterans Courts, one, have structure. They've lost it, but they have structure. Two, appreciate a rank structure where they realize that the person in charge, the judge, is not an enemy, but has the dual function of looking out for them. And three, I think Ed and myself as well, we are very stern yet caring at the same time. And one of the benefits of Veterans Court is I can look at a defendant and say, what the hell were you thinking? And they will have an answer to that question as though I am the paternal figure in that situation. And then we will sit down and have a private chat about what we're going to do to fix it. We're also blessed in Veterans Court that we have the VA. I mean, that's the reality of it. I have in-court personnel from the VA. I have psychologists, I have support staff, I have housing people every single time. So we have the assets right now to get things done. And ultimately, I can tell you, Veterans Court has a 3% recidivism rate since we started in 2012. Think about that, 3%. And it's because we're able, and when I say we, it's the royal we. I have to be abundantly clear. I think Judge Ross and Tarlika and these other judges, they lead by example in doing things. I have the benefit, and Ed has the benefit, of having the VA step in and do all the heavy lifting for us. So I think in order to be in Veterans Court, one, the prerequisite is you are a veteran. Two, it is you actually have to care. Three, it helps if you're a combat veteran. You understand PTSD. You understand TBI. You understand when something explodes 500 feet from your head, the mental consequences of it. I mean, I don't want to speak for Ed, but we wake up in the middle of the night just like some of these defendants do. And our source is knowing that we're doing good. And unfortunately, a lot of these defendants' source becomes substance abuse, you know, or schizophrenia, or horrible dreams, because the easiest way to suppress mental health issues is substances. And so that's where we have a lot of our focus. Ultimately, I think every one of us has realized, or realized before we got the job, that we're in it for the long haul. So in other words, Ari has people who test positive, Tarlika has people who test positive. Our goal is not to minimize that, but to help people start not testing positive, or to start addressing the substance abuse issues. And all of us are sufficiently cognizant to realize that there's going to be missteps, sometimes multiple missteps. But if we get to the end result, these judges, every one of them has the patience to address it. My opinion. I could be wrong.
I'll go ahead and step in, Chris, because I'm just gonna go off what Judge Fry said, which is incredibly accurate. As sitting judges in these therapeutic and specialty courts, you know, it's our job to help people who are struggling and identify that they are struggling, and then really get to the root of the problem. Like Judge Ross said, it's about the root. It's about the ability to be able to think outside of the box, not as a traditional sitting judge, but as a therapeutic, holistic judge who's going to say, listen, what is the root of this problem? Where is the trauma? Where did it start? How can I help you? So I do that by getting them to write essays at the beginning. If they start testing positive, that's one of our sanctions, because we use sanctions and rewards, which we'll get to a little later in our questions. Since I'm a co-moderator, I get a kind of heads up on that. But you know, one of our sanctions is starting low in the essay category, and you get a kind of idea of what these people, where they come from, where their trauma comes from, what the root of the problem is, and then I can sit down with John, let's say, you know, John, or just using a name, and say, listen, I know that you had this problem in your past. Let's get through this. Let's work through this. And then the next time I see them, I can follow up with that. And that goes off what Judge Barner was saying, was consistency. We are here as the judge to be as a team. We are here to support you. We are here to help you. So every day, all of us come to the bench, I think, with that mindset. Actually, I know with that mindset, which is not to be the traditional judge, but to think outside of the box and to help these people in all areas, to do everything we can to help them to get to the root of the problem.
Chris, I would say what is needed for the job is certainly patience, resourcefulness, and a skill at multitasking. I'm always case managing from the bench. I'm picking up my phone, I'm dialing different agencies, I'm looking for housing for people, I'm looking for different services. So if you are that kind of person, if you have the heart of a social worker, I think that this is the kind of work for you. I think I've been practicing social work without a license my entire professional career. And if you're a good listener, I think that's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I think that this is the kind of court that listening is the most important.
Okay.
Boy, I think there are a number of lawyers that'll be willing to protect you from practicing social work without a license. I'll pass it off to Sue.
I know part of the criminal justice reform conversation discusses diversity on the bench and how important diversity on the bench is. I just am curious what Chief Judge TUTER's position is on that. I know in criminal, I know in our specialty courts we have diversity. How is it in criminal in general with respect to diversity on the bench? And is that seen as one of the things that you're assessing when you're assigning divisions?
Well, that starts long before we assign divisions, Sue Ann. I would say, since I've been chief judge, pretty much anybody who's applied to be a judge through the JNC process or ran, not all of the people who run, but a percentage of them, have kind of reached out to me in some way and say, I'd like to put my name in, or I'd like to do this, or I'd like to do that. I think way back before when I started to get kind of more involved in administration in the building, probably when I was admin judge in civil, I reached out to some of my colleagues like Judge Robinson and Judge Gillespie. Judge Gillespie wasn't a judge then. Judge Robinson was a magistrate. I think it's critical, and I've done everything I can behind the scenes. You can't do this up front because I have to be the chief judge for anybody who wins, even if it's against an incumbent judge or anybody who's appointed. So I have to do these things quietly and behind the scene. But I think Gene Pettis will tell you that we, since he was Florida Par president at least, we've worked really hard to try to get qualified minority candidates to put their name in to be a judge and to do what we can behind the scenes to show that this person's qualified and should get the governor's look and the governor's appointment. We're right now 11, I think, 10 or 11 African-American judges, and I can't remember the count on Hispanic. I do know male to female now. They just took over after this last election. There are 51 females, Aries, so we're in the minority now, 50 male judges. So there's great diversity that way. But I guess it's a combination. You definitely want to have people in the criminal courts, the judges, reflect the people that are in those courtrooms as much as you can. And then you'll take judges. I think somebody hit it a minute ago, and because I've had 3 or 4 judges that I know intimately well, both black and white, who came to me and said, I can't do it anymore in criminal court. I can't go to work and sentence people to jail every day of my life. It is just such a stress and such a downer. And so you don't see people living over in those divisions for years and years and years because it wears on you. You have to be a different kind of personality over there for sure, completely different than Ari. I mean, those people are charged with, in many cases, horrifically violent crimes, and you have the victim sitting out in the audience. And so everything that we do as far as those assignments, we try to keep that in mind, but also, you know, you don't want to throw, in many cases, someone into the fire over there who's never had any contact with the criminal justice system, but then you don't want to throw a prosecutor over there right away, and they're, you know, getting into feuds with their colleagues right away, who were just working cases with. So Sue Ann, it's such a complexity of issues. We've done good with diversity in the 17th. We need to do better. I'll say this publicly. It gives me great chagrin when I see we worked so hard to get a minority African-American judge appointed, and then 2 years later, they just run against the judge for no real reason. The judge done their job, they're qualified, took a hard, long work with a Republican administration to get that person appointed, and then someone just out of the blue runs against them because I guess they think they can beat them. That has been frustrating for me as a judge and as someone who's really behind the scenes done as much as I can without offending anyone to try to keep us in the mix with minority appointments and minority elections.
Well, we appreciate your work.
Definitely, Judge TUTER. I will say that, you know, from where you sit in your position, you know, I think that, you know, I'll just speak for myself that I think that you've been a great supporter of all the judges that have worked under you, and the broader community. You know, so I think that, you know, I don't think that anybody would say that you're certainly, you know, that you're not putting in any effort. I think that is very evident. To kind of piggyback off of that, though. And
Chris, you folks, you asked earlier what you can do on something like that. You lawyers in the community, find qualified people to run for these positions or to seek appointment for these positions. We haven't had many appointments lately because we kind of capped out on that, but that's really you all's role. I can't go out and say, Chris, please run for judge. Chris, put your name in with the JNC. You've got to find the folks who can be qualified to do it and who can be appointed, don't have any issues in their background. That's some things you guys can help us with to help diversify our judiciary.
Right, point taken.
I just want to say one quick thing on diversity of the bench. So many times when we talk about diversity on the bench, we're kind of focusing on the public trust and confidence that it is still instills in the community when they see a diverse bench. What I don't think a lot of lawyers or people realize is how much it enhances us internally. Because, you know, as a judge, I'm not allowed to go to my lawyer friend and ask for advice on a case. I'm not allowed to, you know, troubleshoot or give case specific examples that appear in front of me with my friends and with other lawyers. So the only people that I can really, you know, use as a soundboard or kind of discuss my cases with are other judges. And in juvenile court, we're really lucky to have a representative bench, and that I can learn other judges' perspectives that have different backgrounds from me. I can share my perspective with them. And I think when we all do that and we have a more diverse bench, it makes each individual judge stronger. So, I mean, I think that's another look that people on the outside don't realize.
I 100% agree with you, Judge. And I was actually going to say, and diversity isn't just what you see on the outside, by the way. Our diversity on this bench is rich. We are diverse in our educational experiences, our life experiences, our actual careers. I mean, Judge Porth before he was a judge, he had a life before he was a judge. He was a state rep. Judge Fry, before he was a judge, he was an officer. We have such a rich and just amazing bench. And I see Judge Ross with her Gator cup, but she was a Gator. I was a Gator. I mean, it's the reality, guys.
There are some downsides and some of those.
Hey. But it's
well, I mean, but Tarlika, look at it. Who has a Judge Williams? I mean, if you haven't ever seen a judge on the bench talk to a group of people, and he can say things I never could say, trust me, but go watch Judge Williams or a brigadier general to talk to veterans. I mean, what you say is amplified, and it is not always the color of your skin, but it makes a big difference, especially in juvenile and in criminal court felony, where they see someone they can hopefully identify with, that they'll accept what they're saying more so than they may from someone like me. But it is something that it just compels us to work on every year. You can't just say, okay, we've done enough and let it go to the side, Sue Ann. This is something we all, as a bench in a bar, have to focus on year after year after year, really in perpetuity.
So, Judge Tutor, I think that's a great point. And while we're on the topic, I'll just come back to you with a follow-up. And anybody, you know, this is open to anybody, just for Judge Tutor to lead off. What advice would you give to somebody who is aspiring to sit in one of these specialty courts?
Well, I think express the passion that you see from our colleagues. If someone comes in and just says, you know, listen, they're beating me up over in criminal, can you get me out of here and you know, dump me in juvenile for a couple of years so the heat will get off of me, is not the right candidate. It really has. It doesn't matter what their background is. It really doesn't, because it helps in some instances. But look, the passion behind wanting to do the work, to me, is more important than any of your background, where you went to Yale Law School or whatever that is, because as Judge Ross says and Judge Fry said, they exemplify exactly what I've kind of been saying. There are certain judges that could never do juvenile work. Juvenile is therapeutic based. It primarily is not addressed towards taking people into custody or sending people away for years until they attain certain age, to a certain age. It requires a different person on a different level to talk to people like Ari does. I mean, can you imagine speaking to defendants in a mental health court day in and day out, and having the patience and the wherewithal to know what to say that doesn't trigger, you know, some kind of an adverse reaction? So I would be looking for that judge that really has a passion and expresses to me why they think they would be healthy in that court, and more importantly, what they contribute to that court. I don't think it comes through enough with Judge Ross with the Rise Court, which was her idea alone, and all of the interventions that the Veterans Court and Ari Porth and Judge Barner have suggested once they got in the court to improve the court. It isn't just, let's go with what the guy did last time. What can we do as a judiciary to improve it? And so when that person comes along, Chris, that's a person I'm going to put into that specialty court, because they're going to express the desire to improve the court and to advance what's been going on over that court in a favorable way to divert the person away from the criminal justice system.
Well, I will transition a little bit. I want to find out from the judges, how has COVID-19 and obviously the courthouse being closed affected what you see in the Zoom court, I guess, and how is that affecting specialty courts? Anyone can answer.
I'll go ahead and take that one. I think we're seeing obviously an uprise in our overdoses and our drug use and our opioid pandemic, everything that's going on with COVID. But I have been speaking on the silver lining in all of this, and that is being able to see into the world of some of our participants, being able to see that they're working at Dunkin' Donuts or their housing conditions, or, you know, meeting their children and their family, being in their home has been really the silver lining in this. And it also gives us the ability to help people on a much more regular basis. So although our overdoses are going up, we have the ability to kind of recognize as a circuit that we can run this virtually, and we can help people a little more regularly and be, again, that's the stable force that they need on maybe even a weekly basis. So it's really been incredible just being able to go into the lives of some of our participants, and also not having to disrupt their life by coming to court and going through security and being dressed and, you know, having to take off an entire day off work when they just can't afford that day off work goes, it pays their rent. So, you know, if they're at Dunkin' Donuts and they're working the counter and they're like, Judge, I'm working, I'll get them in, I'll get them out. Like that's the silver lining in all of this. And I think that although there's a lot going on that is negative, and we're doing everything we can to help everyone through this situation and their drug use and their triggers and all of that. I think that really the feedback has been really good with the virtual and the Zoom hearings for a drug court, at least.
Along those same lines from what Tarlika was noting, I have liked Zoom court, not because I enjoy the commute, which I do, Judge Tutor. I like the commute from my bedroom to my kitchen, but it is so nice to be able to spare folks the expense of the cost of the bus or the cost of parking or the 3-hour commute that some people have to take for the bus to get to the courthouse if they live in Pembroke Pines, to get down to the courthouse to come see me, or as Tarlika said, the whole day is blown for a court appearance. We're saving them that expense, and we're still able to visit with them for our status hearing and make sure that they're okay, and make sure that they're taking their medication, and make sure that they're getting their case management services. So I really hope, and it's also much more convenient for many of the attorneys. I've heard from many attorneys that are thankful that we're able to have these hearings and they're able to Zoom into multiple courtrooms in the same morning without running to different satellite courthouses, and they can be in multiple parts of the state in the same morning. So I'm hoping that going forward, besides contested hearings and trials, that we're still able to accommodate people that have these difficulties with getting downtown. And also, I think that the folks that need the face-to-face contact, the folks that are isolated, the folks that are lonely, it's important that they have that connection, that we make sure that they're okay, that we can check in on them. So I think that it's been tremendously helpful that we have been able to pick up so quickly. And Judge Tutor, thank you for making this platform available so early on.
I can actually add something, because again, community court is a little bit different. What Judge Tutor and I have been able to do with the city has been really amazing. Again, we brought the court to the people. So our court, although we're operating on a very limited basis right now, we're able to have court at the Holiday Park, which is the testing facility. So we're able to offer rapid COVID tests there if you're, charged with a crime. That way, because we can actually take those individuals. If they are positive, we have a non-congregate facility for them. If they are negative, we have a facility for that too. And that's our partnership. That's how all of this works. And being able to bring the court on Zoom, because the way it is set up under a tent, you have different stations with iPads and computers. So the service providers are even brought there. So everyone can still see everyone and have that face-to-face contact and that continuity of services. Because again, we talked about that being, having that continuity is really important. And it's key to our court survival. Because if the courts go away even for a little bit, people forget. But the greatest thing about this is when we reopened our community court last month, we had guys who had been drinkers for a very long time. But they managed to stay sober because the last time we saw them in person was in March. They managed to stay sober the entire time. We were able to graduate 2 people on our first day open. So, I mean, that's an amazing feature of this court. Again, being able to do it on Zoom, that continuity of services and continuity of care is truly important.
And I think as a result of the pandemic, we're going to change the way we do things. If you look at history in every major national incident, it resulted in us doing introspection and coming up with a solution. I mean, in 1918, where more people died from disease than from combat, we started to do inoculations. You go to Korea and Vietnam, paramedics came out of it. And I think that one of the things that we've come to realize as a result of this is that there are better ways for us to do our jobs. And I'm excited to see what happens in the next year or two as far as Zoom hearings. It allows us to schedule more things. It allows us in specialty courts to spend more time with people, with it being less of an impact to the individuals. And so people who rely on STACY for continuity can see her more often as time progresses because we're able to do it virtually versus physically being present in the courtroom. And I think that will be in this horrible, horrible time, one of the phenomenal outcomes to the way we do business.
And also, I just want to tack on to that, the ability to, I don't want to speak for all the judges on the panel, but the ability to have an open door policy where if someone is needing help, needs somewhere to live, is having cravings, or just needs to go into detox right away, they get on our Zoom immediately and hi, how are you doing, John? What's going on? I'm having cravings. Okay, well, let's get them into Memorial Share, get Memorial Share on, and we can immediately get them into Memorial Share within a 5 to 10 minute time frame. When we're in the traditional court, that's not possible. So having the ability to be an open door therapeutic courtroom is really important at this time, and I think that's also a good thing that's come from this.
That's a great point. So I've got a question, and I want to start with you, Judge Fry, and this is an audience question, and I think it'll set up what I think my follow-up questions be to kind of paint 2 sides of the spectrum. So say you have a person that comes into your court that has a chronic substance abuse issue, doesn't seem to be able to overcome, their addictions. What can your court do to try and help them do that?
We put them in a residential facility. The VA has that ability. And I guess the beauty of Veterans Court, and I wish we could get it out to everybody, is that we have a central hub for all the services. So, and again, I will have defendants look at me, and I know Ed does as well, saying, I just can't do this. And that's just a green light for me. Well, let me help you get to where you need to be. And we have residential facilities in Veterans Court. It's no expenses to defendants who are honorably discharged. So the money is not an issue. The VA is incredibly good. It breaks my heart when I see VA this and VA that. I can tell you in Veterans Court, they are incredible. So where you have somebody with a chronic situation that can't fix the problem on their own, we will step in and place them in a residential facility. I know I have gone to residential facilities, just to see how things are going. But we have the ability, at least in Veterans Court, to place somebody in a residential facility. They will go with their mentors to the facility. We will pick them up and take them. The sheriff's office will do anything we ask them to do. So where it's a chronic issue, You know, and I know you can't necessarily do this in other divisions, but I will sit down and have a come to Jesus meeting with whoever it is and let them know that I'm going to light them up if they don't get with the program. Again, that's veterans court. I'm not saying that's what everybody does. And you would be amazed at how well these people respond to that, because what they're missing is the structure and the leadership. You know, I mean, and God, I love them all. I really do. I mean, in my mind, anybody who has served this country is better than anybody else. I probably shouldn't say that, but I just did. So having said that, I would do anything I can for them. You know, I'll put them in my car if I thought I could get away with it and take them myself. But we will put people in custody in a residential facility to get with the program.
Right. Would anybody else like to add on to that? If not, I have a question that I'm gonna.
In community court, we have the added benefit. I think actually we have the same in mental health court, if I'm not mistaken, a peer specialist. We have peers, people who've already been through the system, people who have recovered, who are still in recovery. You know, we have peers who can offer a unique glimpse into, you know, what's going on with this person and how can we help. And that's an amazing thing, again, that each one of our courts is a little bit different, but we all have something that we can do and offer, whether that's Judge Fry taking people in his car, or me. Unfortunately, I've done this. I have, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to, but you know, you have to get out there, go out on the street corner and talk to them. Like, hey, you didn't come to court today. What happened? Because my court, again, is right down the street from where the encampment used to be. I would go off the bench and walk over and say, why aren't you in my courtroom? Let's go. So yeah, this is what we do. I mean, again,
Don't do that too often.
I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. I did it one time. I'm not doing it again.
Judge Barner, I'm so happy that you brought up the power of peers, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to mention it earlier. We often use in mental health court these peer specialists. It's a state certification, somebody that has a lived experience either through mental illness or substance use, somebody that has walked through their struggles and holds the person's hand, whether it's in mental health court or drug court. And they are such exceptional people and treasures in these therapeutic courts. So anybody out there listening that thinks they might have somebody that could benefit from a peer, it's South Florida Wellness Network. You can visit them online, and I would highly encourage it. It's run by a lady who's in recovery herself. She's wonderful. She frequently tells her story. Her name is Susan Nyamore, and she's one of my personal heroes.
Thank you for that, Judge Porth. I kind of want to, you know, Judge Barner, I'll go back to you. I think you kind of touched on it, but what I want to know is what's the best outcome? What do you consider an ideal outcome? So I know Judge Fry had mentioned a recidivism rate of about 3%. What do you think is a good outcome in your court, and what do you think the best tool that you have in your toolbox is to do that, or multiple tools?
I can tell you, I definitely have multiple tools, because it's not just one thing. It's not a one size fits all, because again, I'm dealing with everything. I'm dealing with veterans. Sometimes I have to call on my veteran support. And, you know, for a veteran, it may be just reconnecting them with their family, because that's actually something that's hugely important. A lot of the homeless folks, you know, they have family. They have family out there who may not know where they are. So for me, family reunification is hugely important. And that's something that we take pride in community court, and being able to bring families back together. So that is actually one outcome for me that personally is. I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman, he was living on the streets. He was a veteran from the English Navy, and he was sending his checks to his children so they can live in a home, but he was living on the streets. Well, and his family in Guyana had no idea what was going on. Through the support of the public defender, the city public defender, Jaron McLawrence, in that case, we were able to reunify this man with his family. We found all the way in Guyana. They flew to the United States, they flew to Florida and came and got him in our courtroom. That, I mean, you can't pay for that, you know, that is priceless. You know, another example, I'm sorry, go ahead, Judge TUTER.
Well, I was just gonna say, Chris, when you talk about success, I think I handled the first community court session. Judge Barner was there. I remember it was the second guy who came up. And I think all of us see homeless people from a distance. You know, you don't really interact with them unless they're asking you for money, or a lot of times you try to cross the street to avoid them, all of those kinds of stereotypes. So when you sit down in front of them, like Judge Barner was, and they start telling you their story, I mean, you just want to cry. but for the grace of God, you're not where that person is, and he's not sitting in your seat. It's just so many different examples. But anyway, this kid, he wasn't a kid, he was probably in his 50s. But anyway, he devoted himself to get off alcohol. He did. He came back a few months later. He was wearing a tie and a shirt. He was completely off alcohol. He looked completely different. He was standing at the door, greeting other people who were coming to community court. That's success from the court system. We can't do more than that. There, you know, when you're talking about the alcoholic and the other question, there are so many people that are going to fail over and over and over. And we know that. And we have to give them multiple chances. There are some we're not going to be able to help. But the ones that want to help themselves, like this gentleman, that's what a success is in the court system. They're off alcohol. They're a productive citizen. They've got a job, and they're still coming back supporting their colleagues.
I think that all of us would be chomping at the bit to answer this question, because those that are in specialty courts, that's exactly why we do this, to have those success stories. I'm just going to hold up this picture. I covered the face because it's a juvenile. I have a stack of letters here, and this young man had a string of burglaries and ended up graduating valedictorian of his class. I have a string of letters here of people juveniles who've overcome these challenges and gone on to succeed, gone to college. I have girls right now that are running their own businesses. There are so many success stories that we have, and I think that's what fuels us and gives us this passion to continue, because when these specialty courts do work, it's the most beautiful thing you can experience.
Yeah,
and I think that's, you know, every one of us has a ton of stories we'd love to share about that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely the best part of the job. Just having alumni come in or graduates come in and just thank you or offer their services to anyone who has like-minded issues. Or I can say, oh, someone was just in your shoes. Let's get Sue Ann on the phone and have Sue Ann be a peer specialist, and they're happy to do it. They're so thankful for our work, and they're ready and willing to give back. So I think that's one of the best parts of our positions in these courts.
And also at this time, as a moderator, I just want to encourage the attendees to send in their questions. And I'm going to ask this question from an attendee. It's specifically for Judge Ross. It says, Judge Ross says that 75% of the defendants in her division are African American. What has she found to be an effective way to reach the families and overcome some of the cultural challenges leads that demographic into criminal court? Okay, cultural challenge that lead that demographic into criminal court.
You know, so as a judge, we attempted to kind of isolate and target areas in which we were seeing the most arrests. And unfortunately, there are zip codes in our county that tend to have a greater number of arrests of juveniles. So a few years ago, the mayors of Fort Lauderdale got together and tried to put a program in place with the community to try to mentor, go into the families' homes, and get wraparound services. I say the diversion programs that we work with intentionally try to isolate those zip codes that have higher number of arrests. It's a matter of really getting mentors, getting the family support. I had one young man who, you know, I'm going to say his string of arrests, several arrests, and was repeatedly going to ending up in the detention center. He was in the detention center so many times, and I turned to him and I said, you know, right when you get out, you go back in. You know, what's going on? What's the problem? And he said to me that he didn't have food at home. And, you know, he said that if his mom stocked his cupboard with Fruity Pebbles, he would never get arrested again. And I said, is that all we need to do, is put Fruity Pebbles in your house and you're never going to get arrested again? Unfortunately, a lot of times it's poverty. These kids want an opportunity to, you know, participate in the economy, and want food, want things, and don't have it. And, you know, there just needs to be a lot more attention given on the front end of why these children are committing crimes, where the breakdowns are, and how we can address them.
Well, I appreciate your response in saying that, some of the kids are just unemployed. They don't have any, way to generate income. And so sometimes they're committing crimes to do that. That kind of goes into another audience question, just talking about the diversion programs. Someone asked in the audience, could we ask a question about implementation of new diversion programs like Back on Track is something they have in Miami-Dade? And could we explain why there isn't more consistency with respect to diversionary or diversion programs in the Tri-County area or or even statewide?
With the diversion programs, they're great. And so many kids participate in diversion, and that's their first and only experience in the juvenile justice system. So overall, I'm going to say they're great. But for that child that has way deeper needs, some diversion programs are going to need to be more intense and really focus. One thing I find is when a kid's in a program, I ask them, who are you working with? What's your counselor's name? I will tell you so many times the child doesn't know the counselor's name. And I said, you meet with them every week. You don't know the person's name. And then they explain to me that this week someone stood in for this person. That week that they changed, they got fired or they moved to another job. And just again, how is that child going to establish a relationship of trust, one where they can confide and actually receive help or ask for help if the person providing the services is different every other week? And so I think the diversion programs are great, but again, it's money. It's paying people money to stay. It's paying people to put together these very well-run and committed programs. And sometimes that's a challenge.
That's actually a great segue to a follow-up that I want to pose to both Judge Barner and Judge Porth, and kind of throw out sort of two concepts about getting creative and also scaling. So Judge Barner, you had mentioned, I think at the beginning, that you had received a federal grant, right? And so we're talking about how these programs that you all are running are getting funded. So my question is kind of twofold. First, I'd love to hear kind of like a little bit of the nitty gritty about like what that experience was like trying to get that funding. And then if you also want to talk about Judge Porth in light of that, I've seen some statistics that say that, severe mental health illnesses have increased in this country by something like 157%. So clearly there's this increase that is going to place more need on the services that you all provide. And so the question is, how is it that you find, the funds to do this? What's the experience like in getting some of these grants? If both of you could kind of talk about that, and Judge Barner, if you would take the lead.
Hey, well, with respect to the community court, the chief judge actually was really the one who really went after this grant with the city of Fort Lauderdale. And you actually have to have a grant writer. If you don't have someone who's familiar with the grant writing process, that's something you can just take on. That's a beast in and of itself. So you actually have to be familiarized with what it's like to actually write for a grant and know what the grant qualifications are. So we actually had a grant writer on staff who was able to write for this grant, to be able to get this grant granted to us from the federal government. And the grant was limited. So we only had it for, I want to say like 2 years, 1 or 2 years. And once our grant money ran out, obviously that's where the other partnerships come in. That's where we have, again, the public-private partnership. We have our money that we get from the state legislature. Again, there was a line item that was not vetoed this year that was able to be granted to us. I think it's $134,000 or something like that. We also were able to get money from the city itself. The city is also, again, they have skin in the game. So they want to actually help. So the city is also providing some of the funding and support staff. I mean, a lot of the support staff, the IT staff, the actual program coordinator, those are funded by the actual cities themselves where the court is going to be operating. So that's how we got our grant money and how we are able to renew it essentially and getting additional funding from other sources, including the county. So again, we have a varied approach to this. So we go to the county, we go to the city, we go to the state, the federal government. you know, public-private partnerships. Again, we have a lot of volunteers. I should mention this, that we had something over 250 hygiene kits, over 500 haircuts, 950 meals. None of that stuff could be provided by just the county, the city, or the state. Those are our private partners. That, I mean, we had the, forgive me, we have our barber who comes in and he cuts hair. He provided all of those 500 haircuts on his own.
Is that Greg?
Yes, it's Greg the Backpack Barber.
Amazing.
We love him.
He's amazing.
He is amazing. He supports all of our court programs. I mean, this guy's, I mean, he's outstanding. And he also provides peer support because, again, he himself has gone through the homelessness.
Florence, we should let people know, visit Greg at the Backpack Barber Foundation.
That is correct. Greg at the Backpack Barber, he is outstanding. We love him. Again, we also have something with Showering with Love. If you don't know who Showering with Love is, you got to get to know those folks. They provide free showers for people, free clothes. I mean, that's an amazing thing to get a shower when you haven't had one in a long time. It makes you feel human again. So these are the types of things, you know, that again, those types of funding, those are intangibles that you have to have. You have to have that public-private partnership. You have to have the funding in place as well to actually have the structure of the court. But going on to Judge Porth, because I know this is your baby on mental health, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Judge Porth invited me to do a PSA with him for mental health awareness. You know, it's super important that we remember, folks, because a lot of our people who are dealing with mental health issues are quiet and silent, and they suffer alone. So it's important that we get out, reach out, remember to connect with people, and again, support, you know, support local organizations, support your community, get involved in your courts by visiting us.
Before Judge Porth speaks, the trial court level cannot apply for a grant or receive a grant. We can't touch any money at all. If at all, the grants come through Tallahassee and they distribute the money through OSCA, the state court system. So we are the beneficiaries of what these grants are written for. So yeah, like the city of Fort Lauderdale, the grant went to the city of Fort Lauderdale. They got $100,000 2 years in a row. They, you know, you have to jump through all these hoops when you get a grant as far as reporting. And it's the same with the county. The county gets a lot of federal money on grants, and then they turn around and provide it to us through some of those grant funds. But the trial courts, we never can touch money or see money, and we don't have anybody able to write a grant, but we're the recipients of those grants. Judge Porth.
Flo, you were the highlight of our PSA, by the way. I just want to say that. So, Chris, it all has to do with priorities, what the folks in Tallahassee think is important. And I wanted to throw out some numbers. The total cost to house people with mental illness in Florida jails, prison, and forensic treatment facilities, an average daily population of 28,000 individuals, is estimated to be $865 million annually, or $2.2 million per day. By contrast, the state's entire community mental health budget is $463 to serve an estimated population of roughly 2.8 million adults with mental health treatment needs. So it's about deciding what our priorities should be. And that depends upon our leaders in Tallahassee. And we have one of them that is with us today in the chat. And her very presence, I think you know where her priorities are, and we welcome her and honor her for being with us today. So I will tell you that NAMI, the National Alliance for People with Mental Illness, is working on something that they call the Stepping Up Initiative to reduce the number of people in custody. And Judge TUTER has been a leader in reducing our jail figures. But I recently spoke before the county commission and asked them to support NAMI's plan to help people with more supportive housing, and to join the state attorney and the public defender and leaders across Broward and law enforcement in a sequential mapping exercise. And it will culminate in a signing event of a mutual understanding agreement in May, Mental Health Month, where we will come up with our county's priorities on mental health. And we hope to have a document that everybody will support and be able to wrap their arms around and get more people out of custody when it doesn't cause any safety concerns to the community, folks that have severe and persistent mental illness that we can provide wraparound services to, and housing, and medication assistance and case management.
Great. I'm going to shift gears just a little.
Uh-oh.
Down. Did he freeze? Okay, I'll shift the gear for him. What do you, and it's a question to all the judges, what are some of the barriers that exist to actually participate in a specialty court?
Transportation.
Okay.
Let's be honest, transportation, getting to court. How do you get to court if you don't have a car? How do you get to court if you have no money? How do you get to court? Transportation is an issue. And that's, again, where the public-private partnership can also help, because we have, right now, it's free to get on a city bus. So you can get on a bus and get to court for free. Or, again, through the Zoom platform. Zoom has saved people in costs, across the board, and been able to provide more access to the courts. The fact that you can get to court by simply calling in over the phone, you don't even have to have the camera for Zoom. That's access to the courts. It's important. So transportation and actually using these platforms, using technology is important. Those are the things that I think to provide access to the courts.
Did you have something, Judge Navarro?
Well, BSO is offering vouchers for transportation for our drug court. So transportation is no longer an issue. What we are seeing is telephone issues. So now BSO and our POs, our probation officers, our PTI officers are going over to their house, finding them, going to their job, calling in for them. Like I think it was Judge Barner said, if you're not in court, if you're not in Zoom court, we're calling you, we're finding you, we're saying, hey, John, where are you? What are you doing? We want to see your face. We want to make sure you're okay. So, the barriers are really being remedied with at least my support staff, which is absolutely incredible, with BSO, with the private partnerships, with Henderson, with Memorial Share. And like Judge Barner said, Zoom has just made this so incredibly easy, because we can call on all our resources. And like Ari Poor said, I tell people I'm like air traffic controller. I'm always on my phone. I'm calling different facilities. I'm getting James Club on the phone. I'm saying, listen, Ray, I need to get this guy in, or I'm getting 211 on the phone. My last resource, 211, they'll do anything for us. So it's really, the barriers are there, but we are there to overcome the barriers, and that is our job. So transportation is an issue. We found a remedy for that. Telephones are an issue. Getting the DPAs, the contracts signed, getting private facilities to allow our participants to come in and sign their DPAs and to get that over to the public defenders. It's really a collective community effort to enhance and better our community.
And what
every one of us has said to some extent, and I think that it's time to put a nail into it. We couldn't do this without the buy-in of the public defender's office. We couldn't do it without the buy-in of the state attorney's office. We couldn't do it without the buy-in of the sheriff's office and all these other entities. The last person asked, why is there such diversity in the programs in the Tri-County area? And it's because we are very limited in what we can actually do. It's literally the throwing a Halloween party and nobody shows up. Without the buy-in from everybody associated and our support staff and volunteers, every court that you see here has people who unpaid give of themselves to assist us in doing this, because they've either been involved or cared. And I think that one thing you asked, what can the members of the bar do? They can help these organizations. They can help allow us to do things. They can volunteer their time. There's a section in your bar dues where you say that you've done pro bono work, and I believe this qualifies. So having said that, we couldn't do this without our partners. We couldn't do it without our leadership. We couldn't do it without our peers, because as we're addressing these issues, other division judges are handling cases in a more traditional manner. And it is I think it was Flo that said it, quoted Hillary. It takes a village, and we pretty well got that down in Broward. I can't speak for Palm Beach, Dade, Collier, Flagler County up in the Panhandle, but we've gotten tremendous support, tremendous buy-in, and normally confrontational government agencies. I mean, nothing good's going to come out of putting the state attorney, the public defender, and the sheriff on in the same room when we're arguing about a legal issue. They've all bought into this, and they're all 100% on board, and we just have the honor of being allowed to participate. I mean, that's the real answer.
Well said.
Okay, this question is for Judge Ross, because I was asking about barriers to getting into a certain court or specific program, which we discussed. You know, once you're in the program, barriers that can help you to participate. One of the, I guess, quote, barriers in juvenile court sometimes can be if your case is direct filed, and recognizing obviously that that's prosecutorial discretion. What do you think is something from your perspective that we could, that can be done to provide uniformity with respect to the application of direct filing statutes or cases specifically? Like, what can be done from your perspective?
I will tell you that the law recently changed. So in October of 2019, the language that required automatic direct files, those were known as mandatory direct files, in which a child was charged with a certain enumerated offense, and that was 16 and plus. So basically, previously, if a youth was 16 and over and committed a enumerated forcible felony with a gun, there was no discretion, and that child was a mandatory direct file. So that law has changed. And I'll give you an example. When you hear a enumerated forcible felony with a gun, it sounds very serious, and of course it is. But that even applied to a situation where a child was 16, broke into, let's say, an armed burg conveyance. So an armed burglary of a conveyance sounds like extremely serious. But that also applied when a child broke into a car, and in the car there was a backpack, stole the backpack, and within the backpack was a gun. So when you think of an armed burg conveyance, you think of a child going up to a car, holding the gun up, and forcibly robbing somebody. But in a case where a child was 16 plus and they were charged with an armed burglary conveyance, stealing an item from a car that happened to have a gun in it, that was a mandatory direct file. So in October of 2019, that law was actually changed, and it's no longer mandatory. So in that previous year, 2017, 2018, 33% of the youth were transferred to adult court, meeting that criteria. Now it's discretionary. So, you know, the prosecutor's office can take into account the circumstances surrounding that armed burglary of a conveyance now in order to make that decision to send it to adult court. I will say in Broward, again, I think that our county is very progressive. I've talked to other judges around the state, and I do think that Broward, as you can see with the specialty courts and even direct file subject, I think we are progressive here. I do not see the state attorney's office direct filing children these days unless it is an extremely serious offense. Now, if the child's charged with murder, they're most likely going to get direct filed. But I do think the state attorney's office takes that seriously. I know there's a lot of discussion on whether judges should be involved in that decision-making process. I'm a strong fan of separations of powers. There's an executive branch, there's a judicial branch, and there's a legislative branch. I think it's an interesting concept to put judges in a position where I am asked to file a case or to direct a case to go to adult court. But I'm not going to comment on it because, you know, I understand that that's a controversial subject. But
I appreciate your answer. And I also, the most important part of, well, all of what you said was important, but giving the actual concrete example, because I think a lot of times think about direct filing as taking, you know, juveniles that have very heinous offenses, because obviously the language or the name of the statute can sound heinous, but when you're explaining it and saying it could even be a juvenile that's doing something, you know, using the example of someone who broke into a car, which is bad, obviously, but the backpack containing the firearm, you know, is important for us to kind of have those concrete examples to understand, you know, what's happening and what's being done. So I appreciate your response very much. Chris? Or did any other judges, I'm sorry, have follow-up? Okay. Chris, go ahead.
All right. So I think this is probably going to be my last question, unless Robert has something that he wants to say. You coming in to close? You're on mute, sir.
I think we can have one more question. People want to hear from the judges, not me.
Fair enough. Also, I want to apologize for everybody. I think my computer decided to take a lunch break. So my last question to all of you is basically, I guess, what do you want your lasting sort of legacy to be in terms of what you've been able to do in your different specialty courts? And that's open to anybody who wants to ask that question.
That I was here to help.
Exactly. I think that's really all of what we all want. We all want everybody to know that we're really in it for the right reason. We're here to help. We're trying to help. Again, as I keep saying, we live here. We're raising our families here. I mean, this is our home too. So we want the best for our community and for everyone in it. So that really is my true desire. I know it's Judge Fort's desire. I know it's everyone else's desire to truly be that we've helped, or at least tried.
All right. No further questions, Your Honors.
She's muted. You're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. How important, it is for all of us, for the community to have access to the courts and have access to us. So like I say, and I think I speak for everyone, reach out, get involved. If you want to intern, if you want a mentor, I think we're all readily available, and we want to pass the torch and we want to help people down the line. So please just reach out, and also get to know your specialty courts as a member of the bar. Know what we offer so you can offer that to your clients.
Also, we need to thank everybody who's here. You all are the people that do the work. You are the people that make the difference. You do it for nothing other than your own personal knowledge. So on behalf of all of us, thank you.
I wanted to say also, Robert, to you and Chris and Judge Navarro and Sue Ann, we need to have these kind of conversations. We started them over in the judiciary after the unrest with Gene Pettis and some forums he's put together. We need to keep the court system transparent, what we're doing and why we're doing it, so everybody knows. So I want to thank you all for just the topic and the foresight to make sure we have communications, healthy communications between our bench and bar. So thank you all very much.
Wow is the word. Wow is the word. Folks, there's a recognition that a 6x8 cell and 3 square meals a day is not going to be the solution to every problem faced by everybody who finds themselves in our criminal justice system. Of course, we're all accustomed to one face of criminal justice reform conversation. And that's, of course, the hard-hitting advocacy that many in our audience bring to the discussion and to the engagement. And that's absolutely fine. But there's another very important phase of this discussion, another very important part of the dialogue about criminal justice reform, and that is what our skilled panel of moderators and our passionate expert panel of jurists have just so ably demonstrated for us. That phase of the dialogue about criminal justice reform is one of effective and visionary leadership. It's one of passionate, hardworking, and expert frontline jurists that make the most of every tool in their toolbox and at their disposal. It is the recognition that criminal justice reform must include effective and early social and community-based intervention. And I don't think we could have had a more poignant, passionate, and palpable kind of discussion that demonstrates that. I trust that today you were not only enlightened, but you were inspired by what you've heard. To our Chief Judge and to our panelists, to our moderators, and to everyone who worked in the background to make this conversation happen, there aren't words. thank you. You have modeled what this dialogue can look like involving our frontline jurists. To all of our attendees, we couldn't do this without you. We'll just be in a circle talking to ourselves, and that's no fun. Thank you for your active participation, for your participation in the chat, and for sending in your questions, and for just showing up and giving us of your time. Together, let's continue to make change happen. The next in our discussion series will be our conversation on public education and policing. And that's going to be January 15, 2021. Proof that we have survived 2020. So we look forward to seeing you all then. To Judge Porth, Judge Barner, Judge Fry, Judge Navarro, Judge TUTER, Judge Ross, Chris, Suan, thank you so much for jumping in to do this. This exceeded every expectation I could ever have had. You're all awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank
Folks,
you.
have a nice weekend.
Have a great weekend.